Courtroom come to order, all rise. Please be seated. All right, you may bring the jury. Jurors are prepared to proceed. All right, very good. The next witness.
Do you swear affirm the testimony you shall give before the jury in the trial of this case to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. Please say your first and last name and spell your last name loudly, clearly, in the microphone.
Jerry Jellicoe, Jellico.
Yes, sir.
Morning, Officer Jellicoe.
Good morning.
Your uniform indicates you work for the North Charleston Police Department, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And are you here under subpoena today?
Yes, sir.
And how long have you been in law enforcement?
Right at 30 years.
If you would, start in high school, tell us where you went, when you graduated, hang on just a moment, and bring us up through joining a law enforcement agency.
I graduated 1984 from St. Andrews High School, the Rocks. After that, I enlisted in the United States Marines. I was a military policeman in the Marines for right at 4 years. After exiting the Marine Corps, the older I get, it's hard to remember dates. 1987, 88, I went on to Charleston County Police Department, which was the predecessor to what we have now, which is the Charleston County Sheriff's Office. I actually worked there for a number of years. I was a detective. I worked in homicide and sex crimes. Later on, I went to the solicitor's office, and I was a special investigator there for about a year and a half, then moved over to the North Charleston Police Department, and I retired from the North Charleston Police Department right about 3 years ago as a lieutenant. And then I needed health insurance for my wife, so I came back to work at the North Charleston Police Department. During my tenure at the North Charleston Police Department, I held numerous positions of command and supervisory within the police department. I pretty much spent the majority, if you want to say the bulk of my career, about 18-plus years, working violent crime, being homicide and sex crimes against children.
So, you've been retired 3 years. How old are you?
51.
And going back on terminology that's used, I understand that law enforcement has their own terminology, but did you say you exited the Marine Corps?
Well, I was discharged honorably.
And so
I was glad to
if you would
leave.
just be aware of the language that you
Yes,
use
sir.
so that everybody can understand. So, in the Marine Corps, what did you do?
I was a military policeman.
So your involvement in law enforcement started actually with the military?
Yes, sir.
And where were you stationed when you were in the military?
I was first I went to Parris Island, and after Parris Island, I went to Texas, and then I was formerly stationed in Cherry Point, North Carolina, and then I was sent overseas, and I went to Japan, Okinawa, the Philippines, and then I came back and was discharged out.
With an honorable discharge?
Yes, sir.
And did you then go right to work for the county police department?
Within about 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
And tell us with a little bit more specificity what you did. North Charleston calls them patrolmen.
Yes, sir. I was a patrolman.
Charleston County calls them deputies? Or
Yes, sir.
patrolmen, or was there a difference?
It's the same thing. A deputy is just working for the sheriff. I work for a police chief, so I'm a police officer.
And your experience with Charleston County Sheriff's Office, how many years and what type of duties were you employed in at that time?
I believe when it became the sheriff's office, I was already a detective. I'm almost positive. I was already in the detective division, so I was just an investigator.
Did you do any patrolling when you were with the county police department?
Yes, sir, and with North Charleston.
And did you have any training for that?
Patrol?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Well, tell us what that training was.
What I got at the South Carolina Criminal Justice Academy, and then when I rode with a field training officer for a number of months. But when I went to North Charleston, I was already certified, so North Charleston did not put me through patrol procedures again because I was already a policeman for a number of years.
And in between time, you worked for the solicitor?
Yes, sir. When I left the Charleston County Sheriff's Office, I moved over to, I just did a lateral move in county government.
And did you have any training in the solicitor's office?
No, sir.
And when you went back to law enforcement with North Charleston, did you have any training?
I'm not sure what you're asking. I had various training for my specific job set, because when I went back to North Charleston, I went to work on the street. I had to requalify with my weapon because I carried a different weapon at that time than I carried at the county and at the solicitor's office. I went through the annual in-service training, which every officer does, where you take the legals and your domestic violence updates. But most specifically, I went, because I was back in the investigative division, I went to homicide schools, numerous schools on investigation, murder, and rape.
And did you ever work patrol in North Charleston?
Yes, sir. I
On
worked
the street?
as a patrolman and as a watch commander.
Tell us what a watch commander is.
A watch commander is like the lieutenant who is over everything. When I was out there, I'd be literally the police chief at night. There is nobody else to go to unless you make a phone call and wake somebody up. You're responsible for the manpower that's on the street. You're responsible for any kind of shift assignments that need to be done, any kind of movements. You oversee the sergeants who oversee the teams.
So the captains, the majors, the deputy chiefs,
Are sleeping.
the assistant chief, and the chief.
They would be sleeping at nighttime, and I would be out there, and but you would notify them if something happened. You get to wake them up. That's kind of the joy of being a watch commander.
And you'd be responsible, at least at that time, for the number of police officers on the street.
Yes, sir. And, you know, and also responding to any kind of major incident where barricaded suspect or in every felony that's like a shooting, stabbings, or murder, you would respond and take charge until investigators respond.
Can you tell us, when you first went to work in law enforcement, was there such a thing as CompStat?
No, sir.
Tell us about your experience, if you had experience with CompStat, what that means in terms of how something is designated as CompStat, what that designation means in terms of manpower.
During the time that I was a lieutenant, you get transferred around. And I was transferred and made, back then they used to call it the Violent Crime Suppression Section. So I was a
Could you say that again?
Violent Crime Suppression Section Commander. So I call it a CompStat lieutenant. So what I would do is I was assigned CompStat duties, and CompStat is, they look at all the general statistics, the crime that's been reported, like within the city, and they determine areas that are having violent crime spikes. And that is an area that we focus up our patrol and our efforts in to try to reduce the crime. I also, at the same time as a CompStat lieutenant, was in charge of another unit called the Saturation Patrol. That unit's also placed in certain neighborhoods that have been identified as high crime areas. And also, I was in charge of another unit called the Intelligent-Led Policing Unit. And they handle all the violent search warrants. They go after high-risk felonies, and pretty much they are also used within a CompStat area.
So a CompStat area would employ regular patrolmen
Yes, sir.
with a sergeant
Yes, sir.
and their lieutenant and their captain.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And then separate and apart from that, a high crime area or CompStat area would employ
Also, the Saturation Patrol Unit.
a saturation patrol
if-
unit is a separate group of individuals?
Yes, sir. That's another team. I think it was like 15 plus I had on that unit. And they were assigned permanently to certain areas, such as like, I had saturation in Charleston Farms all the time. I had saturation in Shakur, Cherokee, the Wayland, certain neighborhoods.
The high crime neighborhoods of North Charleston.
Yes, sir.
And then you said there was a third team. Was that another team, or was
That's
that-
the intelligence-led policing team, and they do a lot of the search warrants. Like if you have narcotics, let's say, is making buys out of a house, and you know that the people in the house all have guns and all, they've got the technical equipment, whereas as a narcotic officer, they just have the regular bulletproof vest, but they've got the shields and everything, so they can more safely enter that dwelling and take somebody into custody for their safety and the bad guy's safety.
And then there's also, we've heard testimony about speed teams and pace teams and other separate units.
Yes, sir.
Tell the jury please about what a pace team or speed team is.
I never had any dealings with the PACE team whatsoever, but the speed team, I was actually, when I was a sergeant in narcotics, I'd also, when their sergeant was off, I'd have to run the speed team. The speed team unit's more of a street-level narcotic unit that also goes in areas to try to clean it up, where we're having high crime.
So in theory, at least, a CompStat area could have 4 separate police units working the streets.
Yes, sir, and at times, there's been other units that have been put in under my supervision in a CompStat area, like K-9 at one time was put in neighborhoods to help, to even have additional people in there.
Now, you're familiar from your history at North Charleston with Charleston Farms.
Yes, sir.
And if you can describe for the jury the location in terms of bureau, zone within the bureau, and actually physically describe or geographically describe where that area is.
Yes, sir. Charleston Farms would be, if you know where Remount Road is, if you go down Remount Road, one side of the road on the left is the Hanahan, pretty much, and some of North Charleston, but the side.
Depending on which way you're traveling.
Right, depending on which way you're traveling, correct.
So if you're heading east towards the war,
Well,
towards the Navy.
it would be on my right-hand side. If you're talking
Charleston
about,
Farms would be.
right, unless I'm mixed up on my east and
And then
west.
your left-hand side would be,
Right. But Charleston Farms runs from pretty much Rivers and Remount behind Singing Pine subdivision all the way down to South Rhett, the North Rhett area, where 526 and everything is. So it's a very small, like, strip.
how long, if you know, have CompStat statistics been kept?
I know they were brought when Chief Zumwalt was the chief of the police, and I don't really recall what.
Well, has it been a year or 5 years?
Oh, it's been longer than that.
Longer than what?
Longer than 5 years. Longer than probably close to 10 years.
And are some CompStat areas repeat offenders, if you will?
Yes, sir. You would have like, every 2 weeks, I'd have to go to a meeting. And it was kind of humorous to me to go to the meeting because it'd be the same areas. Oh, we're going to have Charleston Farms and Socorro, Cherokee. The next week, oh, what we're going to have? Oh, yeah, we're going to have Charleston Farms, Socorro, Cherokee. So why are we having these meetings? It's just bouncing back and forth. And every now and then we bounce out to Midland Park area, but it'd still be Charleston Farms, Midland Park. You know, Socorro, Cherokee, the northern end of the city would change.
Charleston Farms would be
It was,
a constant.
it was a constant for violent crime.
Now, if an untrained eye, if I was to go out to that area with the idea that it's a high crime area, what crimes would I see? Can I ride out there and take a look at the crimes?
Not really. I mean, if it was that simple to pick these people up, the bad guys and bad girls, we could just ride through it and just snatch them up off the streets. I mean, you're not going to really see anything. You're not going to, I mean, part of the criminal element tries to stay secretive from us and from the general public. They don't want their business in the street. You may see a lady walking down the street that you could assume may be a prostitute, but you don't really know that. And this might be somebody who dresses a little bit different than what you think would be normal.
Well, more importantly, you said that CompStat was based on crimes of violence.
Yes, sir.
And tell us how the use of patrolmen, plus the saturation team, plus the speed team, plus the other teams you talked about, what is the intent to put those officers in a CompStat neighborhood?
Okay, it's pretty simple. You have a geographic location, and we're having street-level robberies or shootings in a particular geographic area. And let's say it's on Sumner Avenue, just to pick a street. Sumner near Attaway. There's a corner store, and we find that maybe this corner store is where a lot of it's spreading out from. So my thing is, with CompStat, is we put cops on dots. So pretty much what you do is you look at the location.
Did you say what did you say?
CompStat, I call it cops on dots. Because when we would go to a CompStat meeting, there'd be a giant map, and they'd plot every crime on the map so you could visually see it as well as when they're talking about it. So what we would want, if we have on Sumner Avenue, let's say we had the street level robberies, and we've having problems that are generating from this particular store at Sumner and Attaway, as an example, we would focus our efforts on Sumner Avenue and right around that area. So I wouldn't want all my people at the other end of Charleston Farms is absolutely nothing's happening there. The citizens are paying them to do a job. I don't need them sitting behind a shade tree because it's not stopping the violence within that neighborhood. So the object is, I would develop operations like the patrolman. Let's say I was having issues with people coming through there to buy drugs. Well, you attack it from two different angles. You got the bad guys that are selling the drugs, but you also got people that are coming in to buy those drugs. So what we could do is set up safety checkpoints. And we would do, because we also have wrecks coming off the North Red all the time and around Charlotte, set up a safety checkpoint and start checking all the people coming in. A lot of times that would lead to arrest. Or our mere presence all up and down the street would bring the sales down. And also encouraging the officers to get out with everyone.
So the presence, the level one of, on the use of force continuum means more than just the uniform. It means the unit itself, the car with the marking on it, or Charleston Police Department.
Right, it's your entire, everything.
And the theory being that the more cars run around the neighborhood, the less that people are going to come out and commit crimes. They'll either move to another neighborhood or they'll go underground for a while.
Well, either you're going to displace criminal activity, or you're going to, mean by displace is push it out of that area and it's going to pop up somewhere else, hopefully out of your jurisdiction. But if you displace the criminal element, then it's a win-win. But you don't really know how much of it you displace because you never know how much you actually deter. And what we would base it on is if we had 2 or 3 shootings this week in Charleston Farms, we have Comstat in there, and we don't have but maybe 1 shooting next week, obviously we're doing something right.
Are you familiar with the route that Officer Slager and Officer Habersham were on April 4th of 2015?
No, I've never even been out to that.
Do you have any knowledge, did you know Officer Slager?
No, not directly. I've never, I'm sure that Officer Slager was somewhere under my supervision during the time I was on the police department, but directly him, I've never even spoken to him, really, except maybe hi in the hallway or something.
So I guess it's a good thing, because people up the chain of command only know those who are troublemakers.
Oh, you do definitely know the ones that have a history. Yes, sir.
Now, there's some testimony, actually by the chief, your chief, about the number of uses of the taser. And there was commentary on Officer Slager's use
Well, I
of
would object to Mr. Savage testifying about his own testimony.
I'll withdraw. So is there a policy in North Charleston of reviewing personnel who get into too many collisions?
Yes, sir.
There's testimony that, or is there a policy that governs people who come to work late?
Yes, sir.
Or are absent too much, or don't go to training, or a number of other things, including the use of force?
Yes, sir. There's a policy that actually, anytime an officer uses force, whether it's his baton, his spray, his taser, or God forbid, his gun, anytime he uses an interdepartmental or wrecks a car even, is generated. So the sergeant in charge of that officer, and if the sergeant's not there, another sergeant has to go, just not a peer, has to go there, they review what happened. They do not work like a traffic accident. We bring another agency in. After that, they write a interdepartmental up, which is mainly looking at, did that officer violate any of the department rules and regulations in that particular incident?
And all those investigations are subjective, is that
Yes, sir.
correct? So it's the interpretation by the sergeant or the lieutenant of the actions of the officer.
Yes, sir.
Is there a non-subjective, objective software system employed by the North Charleston Police Department?
Yes, sir. That's what happens is the interdepartmental, let's pretend I'm the lieutenant again. I get it from the sergeant, I review it, and I see, okay, I don't really see anything. Nothing here, it's textbook. I send it to my captain. The captain signs, he sends it on up the chain. The deputy chief reviews it. Then it goes to internal affairs, Office of Professional Standards. That's what they call it now. When it gets in the Office of Professional Standards, they have a LEA, law enforcement kind of database. And within that is a thing called the early warning system. So they track my wrecks, they track my use of force or complaints. Everything is tracked to see how many I'm generating or how many accidents I've been involved in.
So it would also track things such as complaints.
Yes, sir. You get 2 or more complaints, the policy says within like a 6-month period, it activates.
It would track resisting arrest or assault on police incidents.
Yes, any use of force. Yes, sir.
It would track vehicle pursuits,
Yes, sir.
vehicle collisions,
Yes, sir.
Office of Professional Standards investigations.
Yes, sir.
So specifically as to the use of the taser, is it automatic? In other words, is there a software system that would flag inappropriate use of force with the taser?
Yes, sir. If you tase somebody, it's going to be an interdepartmental, it's going to go all the way up, and it's put in the system. I believe after 5 use of force reports, you're kind of, it's an early warning kind of thing.
And that is linked to a time period.
Right, it's like
the number of incidents.
3 months with the use of force, I believe. But it's not, what's not in policy is, are these justified use of force, unjustified use of force, or just use of force?
So, and that goes all the way up to the chief of the
Yes, sir.
department. You don't know Officer Slager, you may not know the answer to this, but was he ever on an early warning system?
Not to my knowledge.
And if he was, the chief of police would know it, the lieutenants would know it, the captains would know it, the majors would know it, the deputy chiefs would know it, the
Oh,
assistant
yes, sir.
chief would know it, the sergeant would know it.
I mean, the purpose of the early warning system, if you've got an officer who's starting to exhibit these kind of behaviors, you want to nip it in the bud, so to speak. You want to be able to see what's going on. Why are you employing this type of force? What's going on with you? Is there something personal in your life? It's the same as a sergeant having a squad meeting in the morning or afternoon or whatever. It's not so much to, let me tell you what the problems are. Everybody knows what the problems are, but they go over what happened the night before. But it's almost like a fit for duty check also on the officers. Because you stand, as I've stood as a sergeant, I'm looking at my people and saying, is everybody here mentally as well as physically? I need them here mentally. So you're looking at them and you're kind of judging their fitness for duty. And if officers, because we back each other up on this job, and this job can be very dangerous and then very boring at times. It flip-flops back and forth. Another officer may come to you and Sergeant, hey, Jellicoe's having a bad time with his wife, or Jellicoe's this, and he's getting short-tempered out here and on. Then I could intervene as a sergeant before it goes up and maybe offer him one of our employee assistance programs, go to counseling or whatever. And if I think it's even that serious, I could go to the lieutenant. They can even relieve him of duty, not in a bad way, so that he could get some help. So it goes on both directions, is what I guess I'm trying to say.
You go back to your training, your experience on the street. If you had been the lieutenant, either the midnight mayor or whatever you refer to yourself as, or in some chain of command capacity, would you ever have allowed one officer to be in a bureau by themselves?
No. I mean, it doesn't make good patrol that's dangerous.
And does it make any difference what time of day or night that would be?
No. No, I mean, things happen all the
Does crime only
time.
occur at certain hours and certain days?
No, sir, this is all the time.
And in terms of manpower on the street, we have seen a number of items. I know you didn't have your belt on today, but I'm sure you're familiar with the assets that you would carry on the street.
You talking about the Batman belt, the duty belt?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So where's yours?
Let's see, you can get me in trouble. It's at the house.
So on that belt, there are different assets, I guess you would say, for certain situations. OC spray,
Yes, sir.
is that on a belt?
OC spray, do you want me to go through them?
No,
Okay.
I'll go through them. If I miss any, then you can
Okay.
correct me. OC spray, what is the purpose of that?
To spray somebody.
Under what condition?
If they're aggressive and you're trying to take them on, and you want to pretty much incapacitate them, if you can spray them in the face, it will shut your eyes quickly, and it takes the fight out of them, hopefully.
In a scenario where somebody is in a foot chase, is that an appropriate method to gain compliance?
It's not used that often, and no, not in a foot chase. Even though it's supposed to be directed in a stream, you're running into that stream too. And when you spray somebody, if you make contact with them, this stuff is, it's, excuse my expression, it's like liquid hell. It gets on you and it burns, and it physically, so the bad guy might get it, but you're gonna get it too. And it takes your breath away, and so spraying someone in a foot chase or even on the ground, I would not recommend that.
And the reason for that is that it will affect the officer who's employing that.
Right.
What about a baton?
A baton is, if you have a taser, is optional, whether you have to carry a baton. But if I had both, for whatever reason, the baton is an expandable asp. I think people kind of aware of that.
That would be ASP.
Right, and you, I didn't say that word. Oh, and you sling it, and it pops open. It's ineffective. It's not a very effective tool. You have to be very close to somebody to use it, and we are specifically restricted on certain areas where you cannot hit a person with the baton. Well, the problem with that is that's 90% of the body is pretty much you can't hit. But when you're in a physical confrontation, you're only supposed to hit on the legs mainly. If you're on the ground, it takes so much, there's no way to get the baton out, if you follow me, if I'm making myself clear. So it's not that effective of a weapon. Most officers use it to break windows or whatever, to rescue somebody in a trap. Like car side windows, somebody's in a bad wreck and they just can't get the door open. You know, they get confused, don't know how to unlock it. They'll break the window and come in, need to get in a house because somebody has fallen, break the window.
And a taser. What are the type of deployments of a taser that are typical in North Charleston in April of 2015?
The types?
Well, if somebody's running away, is that an appropriate use of force?
Back then, yes.
And is it effective both with the prongs and without prongs?
Oh, yes.
And tell us, have you had any experience with it?
Yes.
Without causing too much embarrassment, would you tell the jury your experience?
I was tased by another officer. I was working an off-duty concert, wide people panic, a widespread panic, some kind of narcotic music concert, and we were there, and a gentleman runs through this concourse, runs down the steps, jumps over the rail, and I see another officer chasing him. I said, oh, look at this. So I follow behind that officer, and I'm a lieutenant at the time, so I try not to get too mixed up in it. And as I go to the rail, I notice the officer's at the bottom laying like he's really hurt. He's jumped over the rail, not realizing it's an extended drop. The fellow that jumped first jumped on top of a speaker. So I jump off, and then a sergeant came and jumps off, and I climb down very slowly. And he's running up onto the stage to play with the band. And as he goes up to the top step, I grab him and pull him down and throw him on the ground. And I'm trying to get control of him, and he is just wide open. And as I'm hitting him, marijuana little bags are popping out of his hair. He's got tied all in his hairs. And I'm trying to get him so I can handcuff him, and the sergeant runs up, and I said, tase him, tase him. And it's dark down there, it's not her fault, so she tases him, but she tased me. She was sticking me on my leg, and I was trying to tell her, stop, stop. And she said, he ain't stopping, and she's tasing and keeps tasing, and it's like, you tasing me, that's why he ain't stopping. And finally, when she was tasing me, I was useless. She realized I'm not any help, that's because she was tasing me. And then finally she tased him, and we finally got him handcuffed.
It was effective in disabling you.
What? Yes, sir.
You ever use a taser against policy?
Did I ever use one?
Yeah.
I'm kind of scared of them, to be honest with you.
Did you ever use it on a citizen that probably wasn't within the realm of permissible uses?
I've never shot the taser at anybody, except in training.
And do you know whether Officer Slager ever impermissibly used his taser?
No, sir.
How about when you're in the fight with somebody on the continuum of force and you don't know it ahead of time what their physical capabilities are, would that be correct? Unless somebody's in a muscle t-shirt or?
I mean, yes.
So how do you, as the continuum of force goes on, how do you judge the appropriateness? Are there
Well,
criteria that you use?
Well, if you're out with somebody, it's really their actions to kind of judge what you do. I mean, you can't go up to somebody, if they say, oh, I'm going to go with you. I mean, you don't pull out your baton and hit them. You know, it's their aggressive actions cause you to be aggressive, and it just keeps climbing. It just keeps climbing until, unfortunately, people get hurt, to include us. So it depends during that escalation, even though y'all are here in the court, you're going 1, 2, 3, it's not really like that. When you get out the car, if I get out the car, I weigh 175 pounds. If I get out the car and there's somebody that's 260 pounds and he's got giant arms, Jerry Jellicoe ain't putting his hand on that man so he can throw me across the parking lot. I know at that point I'm going to have to step it up if he's aggressive towards me, if that makes sense. So it depends on the situation you're in. During your encounter with the defendants, what force you're going to use. You want to try to stay one above them.
Is that policy that you always stay one step above?
It's the practice. Did you kind of stay one step above, and then if you need to, you can come back.
So we can look at the continuum of force from presence, spoken word,
Right.
hands-on, intermediate force, all the way up to lethal force.
Yes, sir.
And compare it to the actions of the suspect.
Right.
And the continuum of force is 1 step, 2 step, 3 steps, 4 steps, 5 steps, but always based on the actions of the suspect.
Exactly.
That's what controls the continuum of force.
Right. If you get out with somebody and they're very compliant, your mere presence, that's it.
Have you ever had any experience in a critical incident?
Numerous, but yes.
Have you ever been involved in an incident in which a police officer was shot?
Yes, sir.
If you would, tell the jury about that experience and how it affected your recall and how it affected your sensory perceptions at that time.
In 19...
You have the relatives. His experience in 1990 something.
Objection sustained.
Your Honor, if I may? It's okay to speak.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll have you step to the jury room for a moment. Yes, sir.
May, Your Honor, the state expended a considerable amount of time in the statements that Officer Slager gave to various parties following the incident on his lack of specific recall. You may recall that the deputy solicitor asked, did he tell you if he kicked you, spit on you, or grabbed you, or what hand? They also exercised a demonstration with his previous attorney's investigator and had him roll around Slager's recall. And I think the purpose of asking Mr. Jellicoe, Officer Jellicoe, these questions are to ask him his experience on recall following the critical incident.
All right, Solicitor.
Again, Your Honor, Mr. Jellicoe, or Officer Jellicoe's experience is not what's at issue here. That is specific to Officer Slager, and I beg to differ with Mr. Savage's rendition. Officer Slager gave a very detailed account of what happened, almost blow by blow. It wasn't that he couldn't remember, he remembered a lot, and he gave lots of details about that. But going through every officer's experience with their personal ability to recall or not recall an event is not relevant.
Mr. Savage.
It's a little bit disingenuous that the state has cross-examined on this and did a demonstration on that. And then knowing that the solicitor knows statements that were made immediately after, and she knows exactly the words that were used, she then objects to the truth coming out about what Officer Slager does. It's an ethical problem, and it's also an evidentiary problem in that she knows what was said, yet she questions the authenticity of what was said.
You're still arguing this objection, or?
Yes, because this is the pattern that the state has employed in this case. Selective presentation of evidence and cross-examining and refusing to allow evidence in that they're aware of, that defeats their theory of malice and so-called covering up, or making up a story, I think is what she said. Storytelling. And this is part of the defense's argument that it's not a storytelling, it's what you perceive in a critical instant, and what you recall at that time, what you can say. But I think we're going down a very dangerous path here, where the solicitor is aware of evidence that's exculpatory and refuses to allow it to come into evidence, such as this.
Solicitor.
It is amazing that Mr. Savage would throw an ethical claim against the state for asking that this court enforce the rules. There are ways to get the evidence that he wants in. He just doesn't want to do it by the rules. And when the rules don't go his way, he throws up some sort of ethics claim. The court, we have made objections based on hearsay rules that we didn't design, and they have been sustained because the court has done an analysis. If he wants the evidence in, there's a way to get it in, and it's through his client. We have no objection to his client testifying. We want his client to testify. That's the way it should come in. And then if he needs to call a witness to corroborate his client, he can do it that way. But to claim that we are in violation of some sort of ethics rule because we are holding him to the rules of evidence is outrageous.
Not talking about the early warning system and inferring.
Mr. Savage, solicitor has, listening to the solicitor, then I listen to you.
And
Do not interrupt counsel while speaking.
Apologize.
Yes, sir, no
again,
problem.
Your Honor, to question each officer as to his personal ability to be able to recall facts from situations that aren't exactly like this one, and witnesses who aren't Michael Slager, is not relevant. The reason we ask questions of the witnesses regarding what Mr. Slager said is because Mr. Slager is the one on trial, and what he did is relevant. What this officer did in 1990-something is not relevant.
All right. Mr. Savage.
So we disagree. And as far as seeking the truth, you don't ask the chief of police if somebody, what's their opinion on how many uses of the taser was, when you know that there's a policy that governs that is not subjective, and you ask a question The truth is, the solicitor knew that there's a method in which these are tracked, and Officer Slager was never sanctioned for the use of a taser. What I'm saying by this is there's been a continuing pattern of suppression of exculpatory evidence, an insinuation through cross-examination that violations occurred when they didn't. And we believe that this officer's testimony regarding his personal experience and the loss of sensory perception is relevant and critical to the defense.
And it's relevant in what way?
Because the suppression of sensory impressions in critical incidents is well documented scientifically, and in this case, this officer experienced it in a shooting situation similar to
So
this.
he's being offered as an expert in that area?
No, he's not being offered as an expert. He's offered.
You mentioned scientifically, it's been scientifically established as a,
Well, we're going to have expert witnesses in this area to come, but in this witness's personal experience, he can vouch for the phenomena of misplacement of sensory perception.
we'll have you proffer his testimony.
Do you understand the court's ruling? All right, so what I want you to do, and we can do this quickly, more extensively if it's approved by the court. Were you involved in the critical incident?
Yes, sir.
Tell the court when that took place, where it took place, and what your role was.
March 16th, 1990, and it occurred on James Island, on Riverland Drive at the, what was called the West District Precinct.
To
Or
make
district.
it as quick as I can, were you working as a patrol officer at that time?
Yes, sir.
And was there an individual who was taken into custody by two female deputies?
Yes, sir.
Did that officer, did that suspect disarm the officer during the course of the struggle?
When he was transported back to the little substation, and during the course of that, somewhere in the building, he just says, "I'm leaving," and he leaves, and they chase after him. He runs across the street. Another officer follows. She follows him. He runs into the wooded area. She goes into the wooded area, at which time he disarms her and takes her hostage.
And in your role, did you wind up observing what took place?
I winded up responding to that scene.
Did you wind up by using lethal force against the suspect?
Yes, myself and two other officers.
And did the suspect die as a result of the use of lethal force?
Yes, sir.
And how did that affect you in terms of issuing a report to your supervisors and to SLED, to the FBI, and everybody else who might have investigated that case?
Well, immediately after the incident, we were put in separate cars, all of us, and they said they needed statements. And I couldn't remember half of what I did or where I was going. Details were just all muddled together. I knew I did it. I knew I was there. But specific details, they ask questions about what's here and what's there, but you become so hyper-focused and direct on what you see and what your involvement is. At times, you get the time, the distance is messed up, everything. So the statement that I was given was all out of whack. And I didn't even, but I would have literally went to blows with you saying this is what happened, even though later on they come back and interviewed me weeks later and sat me down and said, look, this is what we know because it was filmed, the shooting. Oh.
Basically, that's it.
He can testify that as a police officer, he has been in situations where he's had difficulty recalling the specifics of circumstances due to the stress of the situation or whatever way you would categorize it. But the testimony as to the specifics of his encounters and other shooting situations is not relevant to this case, and I sustain the objection regarding that.
and that's the only one I've had.
All right, you understand the court's ruling?
Yeah, I can't talk,
You can talk Jim.
So we're not gonna try that case. We're not gonna
but I can't,
review, sir.
I'm sorry.
I'm speaking to counsel, and you're listening. We're not going to litigate that case or confuse the jury with issues regarding that case, which is clearly not relevant to this case, only to the extent that he's been in situations where he's had difficulty recalling based on the nature of his police work or whichever way you categorize it. I will allow that. And we'll take about 2 minutes, and then we'll press on.